So there's two pieces of advice that I have, okay? So the first one is, many times, I love that you're saying that. A lot of times I can give parents the best advice in the world, but then in the moment, it's very, very hard for it to actually become a reality. I know this for myself as well. And so there's two reasons why that is, or why that can be. Number one is because we struggle with regulation. If I am so dysregulated, I cannot even access my thinking when I'm dysregulated, my intellectual thinking when I'm dysregulated. I'm just thinking like, this is a threat. How do I get rid of it? What should I do? Right. And I talk about this actually in my course, but this idea that we get so dysregulated, we can't access any sort of rational thought. And so we really have to practice regulation. And that's starting to become aware. Oh my gosh, my body, my heart's starting to beat faster. My palms are getting sweaty. My face is getting red. I'm getting activated. Noticing when that's happening, and then literally taking breaths, walking away, regulating ourselves.
Welcome to our first special guest episode, where every once in a while, we will be featuring a special guest in which we speak about parenting in a more general way, in a way that is not explicitly part of our parenting hierarchy of needs, and it's more broad in nature, hitting on more topics. It happens to be, for this first special guest episode, we have the opportunity to learn from Blimie Heller, one of my favorite parenting experts, Unconditional Parenting, whose topic of expertise is perfectly aligned with our first topic of creating a relationship with one's child. Blimie explains her whole entire parenting journey, how she came to discover her methodology, and why trust and respect is of the utmost importance for parenting, and how we can change our reactions in the moment, and so much more. Without further ado, enjoy the episode. This week's guest is Mrs. Blimie Heller. Blimie is famously known on Instagram as Unconditional Parenting. Blimie is a mom who is passionate about helping parents build relationships with their children based on respect and trust, and as such, became a parent coach. And really want to say a major thank you to you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. You're making all this amazing content, and I'm sure it's takes a lot of time. So really a major thank you for taking the time to talk to education.
Thank you so much for having me on and really giving me the opportunity to share, because every opportunity I have, I'm excited about. I really love sharing this information with parents.
Amazing. Thank you. So first things first, I ended off in the bio about how you became a parenting coach. How did that go? How did you go about that? How did you become a parent coach?
Yeah. So that was never my plan, actually, to become a parent coach. I always loved people and humanity and the way human beings work. And so that was always something that I was passionate about. I've been reading psychology books ever since I'm very little. However, it really was through my own experience with my own child. I struggled tremendously. And at some point I was like, this isn't working. You know, the way that all my friends are doing this, the way that I was raised, it's not working for my child and me. This is not what I want for us.
Interesting.
And so I started, like I said, I love researching anyway, and I love psychology. So I just started gathering a bunch of different books on the topic, from psychologists, neuroscientists, attachment psychologists, different people. And it really opened a whole new world for me. It really, sometimes everything I knew was sort of spinned on its head. Wow. And I had to rearrange all my paradigms and be wait, what is this? And that's really how it was born. And I became so passionate about it because reading it, two things happened. I was like, wait, I would have loved to have been raised this way. That was one. And the second thing was that when I started implementing it into my home with my own child, oh my goodness, different relationship, different experience, different everything. And I was like, wait, people need to know about this.
Wow.
And that's really, I just couldn't stop sharing it. I wasn't planning on even sharing it as a coach. I just would share it with anybody who was willing to listen.
Amazing.
And eventually people were like, why don't you share this officially if you're constantly talking about it?
Right.
So
wow.
That's what I did. Yeah.
It's amazing. First of all, it takes a really self-aware person to, say, look, I wasn't happy with the way I was raised and it's not working for me. That's amazing. And the fact that you're able to take research and go in and not just, it's nice. It's one thing to have theories and theoretical, but to make it into the practical, that's incredible. That's amazing. Wow. So I guess, what is your goal about, in being a parent coach? What is your goal? How do you accomplish that?
Yeah. So my goal is, like what I said in the bio, is to really help parents. My focus is on relationship. Mm-hmm. Of course, as a frum Jewish mother, my ultimate goal is to transmit values, right? Is for my children. But I believe that the only way to transmit values is through relationship. There's no other way to do it, right? And and also there's so many parallels. Like really, Judaism is a relationship. It's a relationship with God, right?
Sure.
And so I believe that if we create this sort of relationship with our children, we're kind of mirroring what God is like for them. And then they have that feeling and that experience in their bodies where it's not just some like ephemeral, esoteric being what they can't connect to, but they can actually relate to a parent who loves me, a parent who unconditionally accepts me, you know? So
Sure.
I really want, so I find that that's very important. So yeah, my main goal is helping parents build relationships with their children based on respect and trust. And even though unconditional love is really what I'm going for as well, I use the words respect and trust because I think love, many things can be done in the name of love, but not many can be done in the name of respect and trust.
Right.
Many damaging or not great things can be done in the name of love, right?
Sure,
I'm doing this because
sure.
I love you, right? But when it comes down to respect and trust, suddenly it's like, wait, no, is this going to build respect?
Do something damaging, right?
Exactly. So that's why that's my focus.
Very cool. So what does that look like? What meaning respect and trust? What is the practically? I mean, we have to unload. There's a lot to unpack here, but what does that look like for you?
Yeah. Okay. So honestly, what it looks like is, and I love that you're saying what's a practical, because I think that whenever I share this idea about the relationship being so important and building, I think most people agree with me on this. When it comes to the fundamentals, most parents are like, yeah, that's not rocket science. We know this, right? But the thing is that when it comes down to the very practical, suddenly it looks like a different story. It's like when you right? Like with me, I also knew this technically in some far off way. But when it came down to actual interactions with my child, I would act in ways that were completely eroding trust.
Right.
And completely not respectful towards her. So respect is that it's basic, it's decency. You are a human being, a full human, a neshama. God created you just as much as he created me. There is no, of course, in this lifetime, we have different roles. I am your parent and you are my child, but that doesn't in any way diminish your value as a neshama, as a person. And so I really need to respect that. Yeah. And so I'm very much on like respect. Would you treat another human being like this? Then don't treat your child like this. And so yeah, it takes a lot of intentionality, et cetera. But yeah, and also filtering it through the lens of, is this going to erode trust or is this going to build trust?
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I feel like it's so hard for parents, especially because I feel like a lot of parents take the perspective of, well, it's not the same thing as I would be interacting with another person. This is my child, so I have certain rights or whatever it is. Like, it's the way that but like you're saying, it's so important to why would you treat them differently than any other individual? What gives you the right? And they're a person, they're a neshama, they're an amazing creation of Hashem, just like any other person is.
Yeah, I almost sometimes I almost look at my children in awe. It's like there's these souls that I happen to be raising, and it's my job in this lifetime to guide them and lead them. But it's such an awesome responsibility, and I really need to keep in mind that like there are a godly soul just as much as I am, and it's easy to lose sight of that exactly because of our role. But I think it's very easy to confuse, and this is what I see happens all the time in parenting: is we confuse my role as a parent to that makes it okay for me to do A, B, and C.
Yeah, that's a very, very strong point. Very, very strong point. So, as a parenting coach, what are the most common themes that you see amongst the parents who come to you for help? And I'm assuming it has what to do with respect and trust, but I guess what specific themes in those realms?
Yeah, so most parents really generally come to me, most and not all, come to me because they're struggling with a child's behavior. That's really how it starts.
Sure.
Now, if you know anything about me, the behavior is the least important thing to me in a sense. Right? Not really. Of course, we're trying to help children with behavior, but in a sense, like there's so much more to the picture than just their behavior. I believe behavior is communication. It's telling you something about the child. It's telling you about a feeling that they're having and a need that is underneath that. And it's more about helping the child through that than about how do we just get rid of this behavior? How do we manipulate this behavior somehow? Which unfortunately that's the way I used to parent. It was like a behavior would crop up and I'd be like, how do I make my child act a different way? That was it. That was my whole entire parenting. It was all a micromanaging, control, manipulation game of how I get my child to behave the way I want them to behave. And that's so short-sighted,
Right, for sure.
And Yeah, and beyond short-sighted, it also unfortunately erodes trust and
Mm-hmm.
really, a lot of times is not respectful of the human being that your child is. So a lot of times they come with that about behavior, and I love that. I use that as an opportunity to educate
All right.
and to
You're
sort
like,
of
they're like coming in with one thing and you're like, no, 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 no. Let's,
exactly. That's usually what happens. But a lot of parents actually follow me already at this point, and so they know what I'm about. And
got
so a
it.
lot of the times they actually already have the paradigm of behavior is not the most important thing, of course, and it's more that they're looking for guidance on how to be respectful or whatever it is.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. That's amazing. That's great. I mean, my dad is a head of school, and he always tells me, anytime I've ever spoken to him about different educational things or discipline and classroom management, whatever, he says, every time, whether it's a kid acting out in a home or a kid acting out in school, they're trying to tell you something. No kid wants to be bad. No kid wants to, be unsuccessful. Every kid wants to succeed, and every kid wants to learn, and every kid wants to be good. But sometimes they're struggling, and they just need you to help them. And they're trying. They don't know how to communicate that, so they do it in a way that's not necessarily always the best. But they just, so we have to pick up on those cues. Right.
Exactly. I always say, like, look at a newborn. We all know that a newborn communicates through behavior. Nobody expects a newborn to communicate with words. They cry, they squirm, etc. And so as they get older, it's a very gradual process for them to really learn how to communicate through behavior. They'll still do it through whining, through hitting, yelling, whatever it is, and that's all communication. Mm-hmm.
For sure. So unconditional parenting, that's your name on Instagram. It's being unconditional is obviously all about that respect and trust. How did you come about developing it? Meaning, I know you said before that it was about how the way that you were raised and the way that you felt you were parenting, it wasn't great. Then how did so you went through the data, and then you brought that data to being practical. How did you take that to the next level to actually implement it? And I guess for me and for all of our listeners, how can we take, all of your amazing ideas and then practically apply them to our lives?
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to give credit for the title Unconditional Parenting is actually from Alfie Kohn. He has a book.
Oh. Sure.
Which was really earth-shattering for me. It was like, it really turned a lot of things on its head. And yes, I love the title because it's not about just unconditional love, but unconditional everything, unconditional respect, right? And so just unconditionality in the parent-child relationship. So yes, so about taking all the ideas, of course, yes, it was hard. First of all, I had to filter through everything that I read and be like, does this align with my own personal values as a Torah Jew or just in general as a mother, everything, right? So, and this is a really big piece that I say every single course that I give, I tell parents, like, I'm here to share information. I want you to filter it through your own lens. Like nobody knows all, nobody knows your child better than you do. Like there's every single person needs to filter it through their own lens. And so that's really what I did. I kind of took all the information, and just because it's written in a book doesn't mean it's true. Just because a very prominent psychologist said it doesn't either mean that it works for you, right? I really believe every parent needs to, and every person should really trust themselves to know or what feels right or what doesn't. Sure. Of course, sometimes things feel uncomfortable because it triggers us, right? It triggers like,
and she was like saying like that. I know that that's a little true, and that's it puts me in an uncomfortable spot. But really,
that's a kind of a different feeling, though. I always say that when it's something that doesn't sit well with you, there's a piece to it, and when you're triggered, there's usually a lot of activation. There's no peace there. There's a lot of fear and anger. Yes. Right. So that's usually the difference. But yes, so I filtered it through my own lens, really, and kind of took it all together and was like, how do I make this practical? And I really did it through my own. Just using my own intellect. And also I gained inspiration from other parents who were sharing stories about what they were doing with their kids, who I was following on social media. Yeah. And so these parents their kids are already adults, because this was like a while back. It was 7 years ago. And so, yes, I made it practical. And that's sort of how I learned through my own experience what it looks like practically. And that's how I help parents do that. In my course, I basically teach the concepts, and I also try to help parents practically, one-on-one especially. I really help parents bring it down to the practical, but also in my posts on social media, you'll see, I really try to show how do we practically do this.
They're so practical. Yeah, no, I love them. I find them to be amazing. They're amazing. I want to talk about them more. I actually want to specifically talk about one specific post. If you're looking for a great way to have some good, clean, kosher fun with your children through the powerful effect of music, look no further, because J Karaoke is here. J Karaoke gives one and all the platform to belt out their favorite tunes from a library of thousands of Jewish songs, hundreds of artists and genres across multiple decades of incredible Jewish music. Personally, I know that I love singing. I love it. I love karaoke, but I was really never able to get into it because it wasn't the Jewish songs. And that's where J Karaoke comes in with their huge selection. From the latest hits to the classics, they even have nursery rhymes for your little ones. And with features like key changes to help you sing, to make you more comfortable as you're singing, and speeding it up or slowing down the song, they have really thought of everything. To enjoy Jewish karaoke your way, all you need to do is head to jkaraoke.com. Choose a subscription that fits for you. And to make it even more fun, you could purchase their state-of-art karaoke kit, which gives you the feeling as if you are today's top singer. You can insert whoever you feel it is. Connect your kit to any device, like it could be a laptop, computer, a tablet, whatever it is, and you plug in your speaker, plug in your J Karaoke microphone, and you sing away. It's as easy as that. That's all it is, and it's really fun. I checked out their website. It really looks amazing. They have an incredible amount of song selection. Anything you want. They got Thank You Hashem. They got Mordechai Shapiro. They really got it all. You can subscribe monthly for just $4.99 a month, yearly for $49.99, and we have a special deal here for you. For any of our listeners, if you use the code JewsNextDoor, DOR, you get an additional 10% off. And if you don't want your children to be using a device with internet, J Karaoke's got you covered. You can download the app onto your desktop. Once you have it up, turn off the internet, let them sing all day long without the internet. Check out J Karaoke today and let the fun begin. So you had a great post that children are being children, doing what children do, and it's on the parents to reconnect to their true selves and evolve so that they can show up as the nurturer and guide that their children need. What is your advice for parents to be able to practically do that? And like, meaning, how do parents shift and grow themselves into that role in a practical way?
Yeah. So this is really about inner work. So much of the time we want to manipulate a child's behavior because it makes us uncomfortable, because we weren't allowed to do that as a child, whatever it is. When really, like I said, like, kids are kids.
Yeah.
For generations, kids have been acting like kids. Like, this is not new.
Right.
It's more about how we respond to them. And so we want to work on reconnecting to like our true selves, meaning like our neshama, our love, the purity, the compassion, the place in us that doesn't have all that kind of conditioning around what this behavior means and what it's going to mean for the future, et cetera. Right. And the way to practically do that, really, I believe, is doing like reflective kind of work. So either journaling, or when something happens with a child, thinking about afterwards, what was happening for me? Why did I react in that way? Why did I get really angry or yell, or what was going on for me? Starting to create awareness around what's happening for me. When I first was parenting, there was almost zero awareness around what was happening for me. It was all about what my child was doing and what they were responding to what I was doing. And everything was my child. And then when I started coming across this information, I started shifting the lens much more on myself. An interaction would happen, and I'd be like, wait, what was why am I feeling so angry right now? Or why did I feel so? And I started really exploring what's happening for myself. Some people at this point want to go for therapy because they realize, like, whoa, I'm activated so often, so much of the time. I have such a hard time regulating myself. Maybe I need to go for help. But you can do this just by reflection, journaling,
Kind of such a great point. I know, like in classroom, like as a teacher. So one of the ways that people will get assessed sometimes is that someone will come into the classroom and not even focus at all on the students, but just on what the teacher's doing. And the teacher will all be as like, oh no, the students did this. Like, no. Let's just look at how many times you said this or how many times you did this. And it's so interesting for, like, as a parent to do that also. I feel like it's so often for people to think of that way, to do that in their own work, or maybe, as a teacher to do that, but not necessarily as a parent, to have like parenting logs of like, oh, today my child did this and I reacted like this. Why did I react that way? That's such a strong idea. I love that. Wow.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you don't even know how much I learned doing that. I learned a tremendous amount about myself and, the stuff that I was dealing with and that I had to work on. Yeah.
So, and once parents do that, once parents take that step back, how can they realistically shift their language to be one that, which is what you're all about, being more gentle and respectful? How do they actually, meaning I love, one of the things I love the most about your posts is it takes like exactly what you could have said and shows you the right way to say it. But in the moment for parents, sometimes that's so hard. What's your advice? How do we do that?
Yeah. So there's two pieces of advice that I have. Okay. So the first one is many times, I love that you're saying that. A lot of times I can give parents the best advice in the world, but then in the moment, it's very, very hard for it to actually become a reality. I know this from myself as well. And so there's two reasons why that is, or why that can be. Number one is because we struggle with regulation. If I am so dysregulated, I cannot even access my thinking when I'm dysregulated, my intellectual thinking when I'm dysregulated. I'm just thinking like, this is a threat. How do I get rid of it? What should I do? Right. And I talk about this actually in my course, but this idea that we get so dysregulated, we can't access any sort of rational thought. And so we really have to practice regulation. And that's starting to become aware. Oh my gosh, my body, my heart's starting to beat faster. My palms are getting sweaty. My face is getting red. I'm getting activated, noticing when that's happening, and then literally taking breaths, walking away, regulating ourselves.
Wow.
So you'll never, from that space, you'll never be able to respond in the way that you want to. So that's one thing. Really learning
you're
how
saying,
to do that.
Sorry to just stop you there. Just like, so someone's, let's say, having those, uncomfortable feelings. I'm getting upset right now. I'm getting worked up. Your best advice would be, don't even try in that moment to really parent, because you're not going to really be able to. Take a step back. Go, say, give yourself some sort of excuse to walk out of the room per se, let's say, and, gather yourself before you try to actually go and parent.
Correct. I mean, sometimes it's not feasible because something unsafe is happening. So, right. And so I work with
if it's
parents.
Unsafe, for sure.
Right. Unsafe, they have to step in, but exactly. But yes, I always say like the discipline does not have to happen in the moment. We have this sort of, I had this idea definitely that the only time to teach my child was in the moment. And if I lost that opportunity, I missed the chance to teach them, and I really push back on that. And I'm like, first of all, we teach our children in so many other ways and moments. It's not only in those moments, but also we can talk about it afterwards. There's no rush. Your child's with you for a long time. And so, and they're really watching you all the time. And so it's modeling this is also incredible. Like we want to model what we teach, yes. So that was a huge thing for me, is to start noticing when I'm feeling activated and dysregulated, stepping away, because there's no way I'm going to respond the way I want to. That's number one. The second one is about the idea that if it's not in your vernacular, or it's not something that you're used to doing, it's very, very hard for your brain to sort of pick up on it in a stressful or in a moment. Right. And so, what I did myself and I found was super helpful. And maybe there's other advice out there that could be helpful, but for me, what I would actually do is at night, let's say a situation happened to my child and I didn't respond the way I wanted to, but I knew that really ideally the way I would want to respond to is ABC,
Sure.
I would literally sit at night and walk through the scenario in my head, go through it like as if I was happening, and then respond in the way that I wish that I would have.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah. And I didn't even know at that point afterwards I read the science that actually what that does is that creates neural pathways in your brain of the new way.
Wow.
And so that you can pick up on that in a moment of like, oh, what should I do right now? You actually remember it more than if you would never have done it.
Right,
and so that's really an idea that you can do. You can even actually role play with like your husband or in the mirror, whatever it is, but you can do it in your own brain where you actually practice speaking like that. Because if you've never done it, you most likely won't, in that moment when it's like, oh, what should I do right now? But if you've practiced it already, it's much easier to remember. And by the way, the more that you do it, you'll see the more that it becomes the new natural way.
That's so interesting. That's so cool. It's funny. I remember reading like years ago that like, why do NBA players take half court shots and like practice these like crazy shots? And the reason is because like, if you've never done it outside of that one time that you need to in a game, it's never going to work. But if you've done it a couple times, you've done those crazy shots or whatever it is, then, you'll be able to, you'll like you said, you're creating those neural pathways to be able to do that. That's cool. That's a really nice idea. That's very strong.
Love that. I love that comparison. It's exactly that. Exactly. That's awesome. That's what I would really recommend. It's a new language. It's like, you don't know it. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. And also like what you've been mentioning is the fact that for yourself, it was, you realized that it wasn't the way that you wanted to be parented necessarily as a child. And I feel like a lot of parenting challenges come from that, the way that a person was parented as a child, or things that sometimes have happened to a person while they were growing up. So how do we, besides for, I guess maybe the answer is just being reflective and saying, okay, well, that was what it was. But are there other ways that we can let go of those things? Because once it becomes so ingrained in you, like this is how it was, I feel like it's so classic, people, I'm like my father, people are like their fathers or people are like their mothers. Like everyone's, often that's very classic, right? So therefore, how do we if we're not happy with certain things, how do we say, you know what, I really don't want that. I don't want that to be a part of my vocabulary. I don't want that to be a part of the way that I act or treat my child. Like, how do I realistically do that?
Yeah. I love that. And I have so much to say on that. I just want to make a point with that is that, you know, how I just said before that we teach our children in so many moments, not only the moments that they do something wrong or that they shouldn't do. That's a perfect example. We literally are like our parents and parent the way our parents did. They never told us how to parent. They never taught us that. It's by osmosis, just being around them.
So
who
true.
they are
It's so
is
true.
what we take on. Yeah, it's so much more than that.
It's
that's
like crazy. The more and more like when I see it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I am becoming my dad. And I love my dad, and he's like my biggest role model. So like I love him, but it's just like funny to see that.
Yeah, you because that's who you're surrounded by. That's like your blueprint for everything. And so that's why I so much focus with modeling in parenting. It's like, don't worry so much about making everything a teachable moment. Focus a lot more on the relationship and a lot more on modeling. And trust me, everything that needs to be transmitted will be. So I just want to make that point. But about not doing what our parents did. Yes. So there's the things that I mentioned before about, like, you know, sometimes it's just about doing our own work and practicing. But there's a piece here also about pain. So sometimes our own pain can come up, right? Around something that, you know, our child, I'll give you a very specific example actually with my own life. So growing up, I was not allowed to say no to my parents, which I think is probably very, very common. I remember
seeing this on one of your posts. I remember.
Yeah, and amongst most people in my generation, it was like, you cannot say no. Now, again, according to the halachos of kibbud aim, a child is not allowed to say no. But there's a very big difference with the way that, see, I believe just because it says that in halacha doesn't necessarily mean a parent needs to respond with anger and force, right? I believe that we can teach our children in a different way, and that we can allow for their no in the moment, sort of, and understand what's behind it and understand them, and then teach them as well. Right. Sure. Yeah. But the way that I was dealt with is that I was shut down or punished or, you know, something like that if I said no. So I knew from a very young age, I cannot ever say no. And so sometimes there were no's inside of me that so badly wanted to come out that I just couldn't say anything. Right. And that feeling of like being stuck and not being heard in a sense, you know? Yeah. And so what happened is then my child, you know, when she first said no, I responded the same way my parents did. I tried to shut her down, etc. But then when I started parenting this way, I was like, okay, wait, no, she's communicating something. Like, create space in the moment and then teach her afterwards. And when I did that, though, I had such resistance to it. Right. So here's the idea of like changing what our parents are doing. I couldn't even do it. Like, there were voices in my head saying like, she's going to think it's okay to say no, and you're not teaching her properly. And also there was another part of me. Wow. Yeah. There was another part of me that was very pained by it. You know, every time I would let her, I would just be like, no, like, no, you cannot let her do that. Like, no, you know, and it was this part of me that still was sort of the child memories of like, I can't do that. Why could you? If I'm not able to do that, why could you? No, you can't do this, you know?
Right. And I feel like also a parent also feels like they need to not exert control, but they need to show that they're the parent sometimes. Like, they need to feel the need to show that they're the parent. Right. Not to say that they need to show that they're the parent, but sometimes they feel the need to show that they are. And that gets really complicated. That's hard.
Right. Oh my gosh. Like, needing to show that they're the authority or whatever. Yeah. So I had a lot of this stuff coming up, and that was all from my childhood. That was all based on my upbringing, you know? Wow. So I had to really, really work through that. And so what I actually did is I actually acknowledged the part of me that was like, you wish you would have been able to say no and be heard. You really wished for that. And I would sit with that and like, let myself feel the pain and sort of hold myself around that. Wow. And that really, really helped sort of like ease that sort of huge pain that I was carrying around it, you know, and kind of let go of that. And that really then helped me be able to stay much more present for my child in the moment. So that's another piece as well. Yeah. Wow. You know, the pain that comes up is to notice it and acknowledge it.
And then moving beyond that pain though, meaning if, let's say a person's not feeling pain per se, but they're more just like realizing as, let's say, they start to become more cognizant of the way that they're parenting. And they were like, oh, you know, those are things that I did that. I'm doing that because like the way that I was raised, but I'm not so sure that's great. Not necessarily that there's going to be a pain with trying to leave it. Sometimes there will be, but maybe not necessarily a pain, but more just like, I can't break out of that habit. Like it's a habit at this point, you know, like I'm so used to doing X, Y, and Z, you know, whatever that is.
Definitely. I had a lot of things that were just habitual for sure. And that's where what I spoke about before about this idea of like regulating, because if I'm not regulated, I'm for sure going to go straight into habit.
Oh, so and you feel like that's meaning a person will act out of habit because of the fact that they're not regulated?
Well, yes and no. Meaning when you're dysregulated, you have no access to rational thought.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So what happens is you literally fall back on the patterns that you know.
So you're saying then, okay, I gotcha. Right.
You cannot choose a conscious choice in a moment that you're dysregulated.
Right.
So you need to be regulated and then also practice outside of the moment in your head or whatever, so that you actually can recall what is that thing that I wanted to do right now, you know?
Totally. So then, once you start to develop this new language where you're trying to be more respectful, obviously, I think what for sure will come through from that is building up a child's self-confidence. So let's talk about a child who already struggles a little bit with self-confidence, and you want to try to build them up. You're trying to be more respectful, but they're already in this place where they feel they're just, maybe not feeling their self-worth as much, or for whatever reason, even if they could be a little bit of an older child or even a younger child who's just feeling that. How, as a parent, can we build up our child's self-confidence?
Yeah, I love this question. And honestly, I really believe that parenting this way is what does it, because it's all about unconditional acceptance. And so the message a child gets is there is nothing wrong with you. The way you are is just the way you're supposed to be, right? And like every character trait that you have can be worked with, and nothing is too much for me, and it's all right. And so, I think that children, are born with different temperaments, dispositions, and some children are more prone to, feeling not so confident or whatever it is, right? But as soon as we start in the olden days, well, when I was growing up, what they thought built children confidence is praise. Telling them all day long, like, you're amazing, you're so special, you're so great. Since then, they've actually come to realize that praise can actually have the opposite effect. It can create a tremendous amount of pressure.
Right. I saw you had that post on that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's not really, I don't believe praise is actually, I think it's the opposite. I think it's about really radically accepting your child for exactly who it is they are and acknowledging who it is they are and making them feel like that's enough. You don't have to be anything other than you, And so, and the struggle with that is like, of course your children will have certain character traits they need to work on more, and certain behaviors that you would want them to focus on more. All that can be done and has to be done, in my opinion, with this underlying sense of like, I radically accept you exactly as you are. Right. And that will give confidence to anybody. If you think about it, a lack of confidence comes from like, I'm not enough. I'm not, I'm something about me is not as valuable as another person or whatever it is. And so all the ways that we parent in this way, everything that we do really keeps sending this message of acceptance.
Right.
Everything that we do, even when we correct behavior, etc. Now, again, of course, it sounds so, I'm noticing I'm sounding very theoretical. It's like probably hard for parents to picture what I'm talking about. Right. But really everything that we do in this approach really creates that.
Right. No, I totally hear. And what about when a child is often comparing themselves to others? So, and that's where their lack of, self-confidence is coming from, because they feel like, I'm looking around and, and maybe that's coming from the fact that a parent is not necessarily giving them that respect that they need. But once you have a child who already feels that lack of value, what, meaning how do we get them to stop looking around at others? How do we get them to stop comparing themselves to others or to their siblings or, whatever it is? I feel like that's so common.
Yes, it's extremely common. First of all, comparison is like the killer of everything, right? Yeah, it really, really is. Comparison is a terrible thing, and it really destroys every single one of us to compare. But it's human, and we do that sometimes. Sure. I think that it's about really valuing your child for who it is they are. They sense that like their value is enough just in and of itself. Of course, they're going to compare sometimes, and you sort of then have to like nudge them back to let's look at you and what's your value and what do you bring to the table. Also, as a parent, we have to be very cognizant of the fact that we should never compare our children. Right, yeah. Even, and I would go even further than this and say, even in our own minds. I'm very into like the thoughts that we have, right? I don't think that our thoughts are like, even though they're hidden, right, they're not necessarily really hidden, meaning they come out in different ways when we don't intend them to, even without words.
Kids can always sense what we're really.
I always say that. I knew exactly what my mother was thinking when I can tell you, I can go by situation to tell you exactly what my mother was feeling, what she was thinking. You can sense it, right? Yeah, and so, for sure. So I would really, again, don't shame yourself if you're a parent who do. I compare my children sometimes too, but when you notice yourself doing that, catch yourself and say like, wait, let me focus on the value that each child brings to the table instead of comparing them. And when you do that, when you really see them and they each feel like you really see them, it goes a very, very long way.
Do you think that this idea of, respect and real trust, in terms of building that with your child, do you think that that's impacted either in a positive way or a negative way by technology?
Yeah. So technology is very tricky. I believe that technology can sometimes take the place of attachment. Okay. So what that means is basically children all need to attach to somebody. We all need to attach, not children only, but children for survival need to attach to somebody to be healthy and to survive. Mm-hmm. And so it's the way that Hashem created the world is that children will attach to their parents, right? Now, the thing about technology is that it sort of can create this like false attachment where a child can actually become attached as if it's like a person who can provide their needs, though it's not. And that can create some sort of unhealthiness, which some people will call addiction or whatever it is, but really it's that they've become attached to it. Sure. So that can then get in the way of the relationship between the parent and child because it's like now this technology is in the space. So I believe in balance. I don't believe that technology is like all or nothing. And I really want to teach my children from a young age how to navigate it in a balanced way. So I believe as a parent that I need to create those boundaries when they're younger of like, this is how much we're going to have technology. And so to really create very strong boundaries around it so that they don't become attached to it. Mm-hmm. And so that they also are free to then play and explore and do whatever. And then as they get older, I try to work with them towards that balance so that they have a say.
Sure. Do you think that respect and trust are messages that are seen?
Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, but that's fine. Yeah. I mean, I love what you were saying before, but just to take that one step further in terms of like on social media, and I'm not saying necessarily social media is bad or good one way or the other. I'm not staying into that debate right now.
Yeah, but, I think it can be both. Like, look, I'm on there, you're on there, right?
Sure. But in terms of like the messages that children see, or sometimes parents see, I wonder, how much that this is affected by that also.
So you're saying when we're looking at technology, there are messages that come through that are not respectful towards children or people or trust. Yeah. Definitely.
Especially because, I don't know if this, I think that you're bringing the light to this in a strong way, but not everyone is enlightened, like you yet. And therefore, if, that being the case, not everyone's parenting their children with that. So the messages that, other parents are seeing sometimes are.
Absolutely. I mean, for sure. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but there are some shows that will show like how to intervene in parenting in a way that to me is, really, really, really disrespectful and erodes tremendous amount of trust. And guess what? If I would have watched it 10 years ago, I probably would have not been so disturbed by it. But now I can't even, I'm like, oh my goodness, what's happening? Because I've been so sensitized to treating children as human beings and as respectable people. So I'm sure, watching technology like that or being exposed to things like that for sure impacts us. Again, though, like I said, I'm on there and I'm sure people are watching what I'm posting and sharing about, and that's impacting them in another way. The same way I used to follow people on social media and they impacted my parenting tremendously. So I think it's more about consciously choosing what are you exposing yourself to.
Right.
Although some people don't even know what is out there.
Right. That's true.
That's why we share. And then hopefully people hear this and say, oh, wait, I want to expose myself to this.
Amir Hashem. Exactly. Amir Hashem.
Yeah.
What about, like you mentioned before, like way in the beginning, the idea that, one of the most important relationships that we have is that with Hashem, right? So how can parents set up their homes in a way that, help foster that relationship with Hashem, help create that atmosphere where the child is built, especially, by the way, just to add one point, it's hard to necessarily always have that same level of trust because you don't necessarily see or, you're not hearing an answer per se. So it's harder, especially to develop that. I mean, that's something that my students say to me all the time. Well, he's not answering us per se. I don't see him. So it's hard to develop that real relationship. So talking about relationships, how can we help our children to develop that?
Yeah. So I think what I meant, like I mentioned before, the first thing is that we ourselves develop a trusting and wholesome relationship with our children so they can fall back on, this is what a loving parent looks like. This is what it feels like, right? So they even have that sort of, this is an old concept that people will relate to God the way they related to their parents, unless they actually do the work to change that. Sure. So of course we want to set them up to relate to God in that sort of way. Then the other idea I think is to really make bring God alive, make God an actually living, breathing thing in your home. Yeah. So instead of it just being something that we like talk about only when we speak about Parsha or, davening, is that we talk about Hashem all the time. If we're waiting in line, and this is, I really try to do, we're waiting in line at a store and it's taking time. They'll say like, oh, and my children will say, oh, it's taking so long. I don't have patience to wait. And I'll say, should we daven to Hashem that he should make the line go a little faster, And so we sort of, and again, does it mean that it's going to be answered? No, the same way I sometimes say no. Right. And my children know that. So, just bringing him alive. I'm talking about Hashem and thank Hashem. Oh my gosh, look at the weather outside. It's so beautiful. Hashem did this for us. So really making him something that's like you said, we can't see him, we can hear him, but making him as touchable and as alive as possible in the atmosphere in our home.
Amazing. Yeah, no, it's a strong idea. I love that. What is your approach towards discipline? If we can get, let's try to go as practical as possible, because I know that your posts go really practical. So, if you can give me some practical things, practical tools, tips, advice, or scenarios, what's your approach towards discipline?
Yeah.
And I know, by the way, I'll say a caveat. I know it all comes down to respect and trust, but I guess, if we can see.
What does that look like in the moment?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So exactly. So the thing is, discipline has somehow become synonymous with like punishments, consequences, and discipline, it comes from the word disciple, which is a student. It means to teach. Right. Yeah, sure. And teaching can take so many forms, and we have to open our minds to what is the best way for my child to learn this, for this to be taught to them. And I really, I'm not of the belief that punishments and consequences are at all the best way. I think sometimes we might need to resort to a consequence at for me, it's like, if you're really parenting with respect, I find that it rarely ever happens. But yes, sometimes, and I really call it the protective use of force, but generally I really believe the best way to teach is to be respectful and talk to our children. So let me walk you through a scenario and show you how I actually break this down. So with discipline, I separate two different things, which most of us usually, mix together. There's one thing which I call crisis management. Sure. And then the other thing is discipline or teaching. I separate the two. So what I mean is, in a moment when a child is doing something, misbehaving, let's say they're hitting their sibling.
I was literally going to ask you, what about hitting a sibling? That's so funny.
Yeah, that's like so common, right? It happens in every home. So they're hitting you, they're hitting a sibling. That is the crisis. Right now, a crisis is happening. This is not the time to discipline. This is the time to simply step in and create safety. So it's so helpful and so empowering when we know what our role is in the moment. And so what I would do in that moment is simply step in and stop my child. The beautiful, wonderful thing is that we are far bigger, far more powerful than our children. And so we can actually stop them. We can block them. We can take them to a different space. We can hold their hands. I like to say, start with the gentlest form of stopping them necessary. And then if they escalate, you can take them to a different space with them. I never leave children alone, or I shouldn't say never. I really try not to leave children alone, right? We don't want to send the message that you're bad or you need to be left alone with this. It's really about, I need to create safety. So we step in and create safety. So if a child hits, I'll give you very practically what I do. I step in and I say, oh, I see something's bothering you. I really try to see I really try to name the fact that I know there's something underneath this. This is not I'm not only looking at the behavior. Right. I know as a person, when somebody—
That's your way of saying, I know you're not bad. I know
exactly. There's the respect. Right. I know even as an adult, if somebody only names my harmful behavior, I feel so incredibly misunderstood. And so like, you don't see my goodness though. You don't see that I didn't want to do this. I didn't mean to, or you don't see my intention. Right. And so it's so important for me to see the intention. So I'll say right away, like, I know something's going on for you, and if I know what's going on, I might even name it like, oh, are you frustrated that he just took your toy? But if I don't know, I'll just say, I see something's really going on for you. And then I'll say like, I can't let you hurt your brother, or my job is to keep you safe. Come on, I'm going to take you away, or I'm going to hold your hands. And I will stop them from hitting, literally, physically stop them. And then my child might, be upset about that. Stop. I don't want you to hold my hands. I want it, right? Like, be still upset about that. Sure. And so my job is to simply say like, I know, I don't like to hold you either. I really just need to create safety right now for you and your sibling, right? For everyone. Yeah. And the child might start crying, be really upset. That's okay. So there's so much here about feelings. We're really all about like, we accept all feelings, not all behaviors. And so we don't try to manage or control feelings. It's okay. Your child gets really upset about that fact and starts crying and says, but it's not fair. Maybe they cry about the fact that their brother or sibling, whoever it was, didn't do something that they wanted them to do, or they're not cooperating, or they're upset that you're holding them and they cry, and you just hold space for their feelings. I know you're so upset. That's it. You don't have to do much except just be there. And so that's what I would do until the feelings pass, and my child sort of went into a different space. Once I saw they visibly now were in a different space, they're regulated again, they're not feeling this urge to hit, then I would say, so like, what was going on? I noticed that you were hitting your brother. I would never ask, why did you do that? By the way, rule of thumb.
That's a good point.
Don't ask your children why. Don't even ask any adult why. What happens is that most of us have no clue why we do what we do. We don't have that much awareness. Like, we just do it. And then also it creates a sort of, it sounds like a judgmental question.
Yeah, totally.
Like, why did you do that?
Yeah.
So
putting someone on the defensive automatically.
Exactly. It's a very, very defensive, like put people to defensive very quickly. So I don't ask why. Instead, I guess, what was going, or I'll say like open-ended questions, like what was going on? Or I noticed that it was something, did you want something from him? Like, I'll take guesses, And then I find a child will usually say like, no, he was just bothering me, or whatever they say. Right. And then I'll say, oh, he was bothering. And I sort of try to understand what's the story behind what happened. What my goal is really is to understand the need and the feeling. What was the need that you had? Was it for cooperation? Was it for stimulation? Were you bored and that's why you did that? And then I kind of name the need for them. Oh, you were looking for something to do. Oh, you were wanting cooperation. So you were feeling frustrated. That makes so much sense. I also get frustrated when I don't get cooperation. And it's so normal to have the impulse to hit. Very important for me. Again, all this goes back to respect and trust. And what you said about confidence and having a good self-esteem. If a child thinks something is wrong with me, that I want to hit my sibling when I get frustrated, what's that going to do to them? Right? That automatically affects something's wrong with me. So we create this message of like, that's normal. Guess what? Hashem made us like that. It is normal to want to yell when you're upset. It is normal to want to hit when you're frustrated, but we have a choice and we can actually control ourselves. Now, by the way, caveat here, children actually don't have Bechira. That's why they're not responsible for the mitzvahs. They literally don't. They quite literally cannot control themselves. So we don't want to say you can't control yourself. Instead, we don't want to say that, because that's a very shaming message as well. Because then the child's like, but the next time they do it, they're like, I really couldn't. I couldn't. And they really can't. So don't say
like you said, children are just being children.
Exactly. There's a reason why they act that way, because their brains are still developing. So so if a God doesn't hold them responsible for their choices, you should not either, but we need to teach them. So
that's
what that
a
looks
strong
like.
line. That's I love that. If God's not holding them accountable, why should we? Wow. I love that. That's so strong.
Yeah. And it's like this balance of like giving them slack at the same time, teaching them,
Yeah.
Wow. So what I would say to the child then is I would say like, oh yeah, so it's so normal to want to hit. I sometimes feel like yelling when I feel really frustrated. I get it. The thing is though, that's not okay, right? We know that hitting is not okay. So what can you do next time when you feel really frustrated because you're not getting cooperation and you feel like there are hits literally about to come out of your body? Yeah. What can you do? And then you come up with a strategy that is age appropriate. Like, don't say like, take a deep breath, and don't like, I always say like, that's not, we're talking about children.
It's like laughable that's even like a thing. It's
right.
like someone saw this, like, when was the last time that someone ever, told the child to sit still and that worked? Like, sit still and chill, like calm yourself down. Like, come on, let's be real.
Right. So I try to find strategies that child really feels that they can do. So I try to match it according to their age and their level of what skill, what they show me they're capable of. So if it's a very young child, I'll just say, you can scream, mommy, that they can do. Maybe, and I can come help. So we have to match it to where they're up to. And then also say, and even if next time we do it again, that makes sense. Like, that's okay. We're all learning and growing. Yeah, and so because between you and me, like I said, they really struggle with impulse control, with self-control by design. Yeah. And so they're going to maybe do it again next time. And that's fine. It's really more about, again, we don't want to send these messages, these shaming messages of like, something's wrong with me if I can't control myself, which, by the way, if you realize, a lot of us struggle with these kinds of messages within ourselves. Sure. I honestly really believe that the only way to grow, at least for this day and generation, is with compassion and love towards even for ourselves. Like when I work with parents, I would say, compassion for yourself, be kind to yourself. I'm telling you, the kinder you are to yourself, the more you'll grow. Honestly, right? The harder you are, the less you will. It just keeps us stuck. And so we want to extend the same compassion to our children as to ourselves. Both of us deserve that. And so, so that's how I would navigate. That's how I would navigate it. And with the understanding that next time they get really frustrated, they probably will hit again and they will need me to step in. And that's my job as a parent, is to step in until they develop enough impulse control, so that they can actually, in the moment when they feel like hitting, they don't. And by the way, what this looks like is the child hits again the next time, and they get it. And by the way, not every single time do you have to have a whole lengthy conversation about it. You can just say like, oh, yes, remember, oh yeah, I see you're really frustrated. Remember we discussed last time? You can call me. Okay. All right, fine. Then what it looks like is somewhere down the road in the future, in a moment when they have either not as dysregulated, or they have a little bit more control because they're, maturing, they'll call you and they'll say, Mommy, and then there you go. That's a moment of maturity where they're actually creating a new pathway of dealing with this. That's cool. It's amazing. Yeah. I actually used to work with my children. Well, my youngest right now, she would hit me when she got very upset, and every time I would just hold her and tell her that, I'm keeping myself safe. And afterwards I'd be like, what else can you do? You were really upset. Well, you can say, Mommy, I'm so upset. And one day, and then of course she would hit me the next time because that's normal. Sure. And then one day she tells me, I know I'm not supposed to hit you. And I said, do you really wish that you could hit me right now? And she said, yes, because I'm so mad at you. Right. And so that was it. That was a moment where finally she had enough control. Yeah. And she put words to it instead of actually doing it.
Wow. And I feel like it's also so common for parents to get so frustrated, feeling like, I already spoke to you about this. Like, we worked on this. We spoke about this. Like, hello. But like, just like, we can't snap our fingers and change our behavior just like that. It's the same thing with our children. And it's like going way back to the very beginning of our conversation. We often don't treat children with that same respect as an individual, just like we would want ourselves to be treated with, or we would treat others with. And that's such an important idea. Wow. Exactly.
I love what you said about that. I see all the time parenting coaches extending so much slack and compassion for parents. Understandably so, they should. I believe parents deserve that, and that every person deserves that. And they'll say it's okay if you mess up, and we're all going to mess up, and then we try again. There's a lot of that for parents, but then suddenly when it comes to children, it's the moment you slip up, oh, no, right? And so it's no. I always say the children have two strikes against them. We all know that change is hard for all of us. Just because I share this information doesn't mean tomorrow you're going to be like, whoop, doing all of it. Of course not. It's a slow process of learning. And like I said, creating those neural pathways. Your children don't only have that against them of learning new things. They also have the impulse control, the brain development, the lack of brain development that's not on their side, that really plays a very big role here.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. And so it's very important to realize developmentally what's appropriate. And it's appropriate for children to hit.
Totally.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question. I feel bad if I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm very curious. You have so many posts, so many, and amazing posts. I as I've said already a couple of times, I love your posts so much. Do you have a favorite? Can you choose a favorite? I feel like it's a hard question, but is there one that you could point to and be like, that's my favorite because?
Yeah. Okay. So I have a lot of favorites. Because they're all come from my heart, and I create them because I feel passionate about it and I want to get the message out there. But there is one that stands out in my mind that is not, maybe it's not my favorite, but it touches me in a very profound way. And the message is, I'm sad for all the messages that children try to share that are never heard because their delivery is not respectful.
Wow. That's powerful. That's very powerful.
Yeah. I actually feel like I'm moved to tears when I think about it.
Yeah.
Because I think, like we discussed before, it's not only with their messages being disrespectful and verbally, but also physically. Like I said, children communicate through behavior. And I think that so often their messages are not heard. Because it's not respectful. And the parent gets so hung up on the actual behavior, the actual delivery, even when it's verbal, stop talking like that, don't talk that way. And they don't actually hear what the child is really communicating underneath that, the pain, the crying out, the wanting to be seen and heard, whatever it is.
Yeah, so that's strong. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
To end off, as you've said, you took a lot of your research and a lot of books that you read to really change the way that you parented, and have come out with this incredible idea of unconditional parenting. Are there any books that you could recommend for myself and for our listeners to read for parenting?
Yeah, I actually have so many. To be honest,
I'm sure.
To be honest, I actually have a whole list up on my website.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
Yeah, on the contact me page, there's like a little link for like the book recommendations, and so there's a lot of recommendations there.
I will be putting your website on the podcast notes for sure.
Yeah, but just to give you a few different, I guess I'll give you a few different people that really inspired my work, so you can look it up. So Dr. Gordon Neufeld, really. Dr. Gabor Mati, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. Dr. Stephen Porges, he talks a lot about regulation and dysregulation. Dr. Ross Green, he talks about collaborating with children. Then also Rabbi, Moshe
Weinberger.
Okay. I was like, yeah. I've listened to, so I don't think he has a book, but I've listened to him speak about chinuch from, the Sefer is Eish Kodesh. No, the Sefer is called Talmidim something.
Chovas HaTalmidim.
Yes, Chovas HaTalmidim. In there, the introduction that the Eish Kodesh wrote.
It's incredible.
I always refer back to that. There's something so moving to me about it. That really speaks to me. So that has been a huge inspiration for me as well. And there's many more, but that's really what stands out in my mind.
Amazing. Thank you. These are great. Well, I want to end off with a really huge thank you. This you really took some very lofty ideas and some very amazing theoretical ideas and really took them and make them practical for us today. And it was, for me personally, I feel like as we were walking through it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I should do that. And like, wow, there's so many practical, amazing things that you were bringing up today. And I really thank you from the bottom of my heart. And also, for all of our listeners, really a major thank you for all of your time today to talk to education. Really a major thank you.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for this opportunity, and I really appreciate the questions and just the things that you brought light to that I was able to share. I love how every single time I'm interviewed, there's a different angle that's brought out, and I just so appreciate the angle that you took and the way that you really helped to sort of flesh out this whole idea in a way that people can understand.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you so much for joining us for this special guest episode with Blimie Heller. Blimie is amazing. She really had so much wisdom to give over, and she really did. She delivered. We will definitely be having her on again. One particular idea that I loved was when she said that most parents come to her because they're trying to deal with a specific behavior. And it's interesting because behavior is the least important thing in a sense. Why? Because there's so much more to the picture than just the behavior. The behavior is just the communication about a need of the child, but there's so much more going on. Right? Like we all know, for example, as she spoke about how with a newborn, newborns communicate just through behaviors, right? Because no one expects a newborn to be able to communicate with words. They cry, they squirm, and all those things. But as they get older, it's just a gradual process to be able to learn how to communicate with words instead of behaviors. So it's important for us to parents to remember that. I'd love to hear your takeaways, your comments, any feedback, or any questions that you may have. So visit us at our website or email us at janolives.org. And you can call into our new parenting hotline either with questions about this or questions about anything. The number is 833-737-1293. And leave your name and your number, and make sure to leave your email as well. And we will get back to you via email. Make sure to follow us, our OU Parenting Podcast, on Instagram at Parenting the Jews Next Door, and on Twitter, follow me at Yair Manshel for parenting tips, quotes, some funny and relevant content. And next week, we're going to be beginning a whole new topic as we work through the parents' hierarchy of needs, focusing on child safety. In this topic, we'll be breaking the model of, the first episode being the basics, second episode being the practical, third episode being the intervention, because we are really addressing each and every single episode having a different area of child safety. For example, bullying, technology, sexual abuse, substance abuse, domestic abuse. And therefore, each and every single episode has within it the basics, the practical, and the intervention, but within that specific topic. So join us again next week as we work together to parent the Jews next door.